How often do we unknowingly let others control our emotions or decisions? It's a question that might feel uncomfortable to ask, but it's one worth exploring. In a world filled with constant demands, opinions, and pressures, it's easy to lose sight of where our own thoughts end and someone else's influence begins. This is where Stoicism offers a powerful lens, a way to reclaim your inner freedom and build resilience against manipulation. As Epictetus once said, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Today, we're diving into 18 Stoic techniques designed to help you protect yourself from manipulation. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practical tools you can use in your daily life to stay grounded, maintain clarity, and take charge of your responses. Whether it's a difficult conversation, a toxic relationship, or even the subtle pressures of social media, these strategies will empower you to navigate life with confidence and calm. So, let's begin this journey together, because understanding how to guard your mind is one of the most valuable skills you can ever develop. At the heart of Stoicism lies a simple yet profound idea, the dichotomy of control. This principle teaches us to distinguish between what we can influence and what lies beyond our power. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. In other words, our thoughts, choices, and actions are within our control, but the opinions of others, external circumstances, and even the outcomes of our efforts are not. This distinction is the cornerstone of protecting yourself from manipulation. Think about it: how often do we waste energy trying to change things we can't, like someone else's behavior or the way they perceive us? Take the workplace, for example. Imagine a colleague who constantly undermines your ideas or a boss who micromanages every detail. It's easy to feel frustrated, even powerless in these situations. But the Stoic approach shifts the focus inward. Instead of trying to control how others act, you focus on how you respond. You choose to remain calm, professional, and unshaken by their behavior. By doing so, you reclaim your power and prevent others from dictating your emotional state. This technique isn't about ignoring challenges or pretending they don't exist. It's about redirecting your energy toward what truly matters, your own mindset and actions. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you free yourself from the grip of manipulation. So here's a question to reflect on. What external pressures have you mistakenly tried to control? Recognizing this can be the first step toward building a stronger, more resilient you. Now let's move to the second technique, practicing cognitive detachment. This is about creating a mental space between what happens to you and how you respond. The Stoics believed that emotions aren't just automatic reactions, they're judgments we make about events. And here's the key: if emotions are judgments, they can be reassessed. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. In other words, our unchecked emotional reactions often cause more harm than the situation itself. Consider this modern scenario. You post something online and within minutes someone leaves a harsh comment. Your first instinct might be to feel hurt, defensive, or even angry. But here's where cognitive detachment comes in. Instead of letting that comment dictate your mood, you pause. You ask yourself, is this person's opinion a reflection of me, or is it simply their perspective? By stepping back, you create room to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It's about understanding them and choosing how to engage with them. Think about how often we let others' words or actions control our inner state. A rude remark from a stranger, a dismissive tone from a coworker, or even a passive-aggressive text can send us spiraling. but when you practice cognitive detachment, you take back the reins. You decide what deserves your energy and what doesn't. So, here's a question to ponder. How often do you let someone else's words dictate your mood? Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward breaking free from it. And with each small act of detachment, you build a stronger, more resilient mindset, one that's less vulnerable to manipulation and more grounded in your own values. Technique 3 brings us to the art of cultivating presence of mind. In a world that's constantly pulling us in 100 different directions, staying present can feel like a superpower. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that clarity of thought begins with being fully present in the moment. When we're distracted, rushed, or overwhelmed, we're far more vulnerable to manipulation because we're not thinking clearly. We're reacting, not responding. Let's take a common scenario. Imagine you're in a heated discussion, and the other person starts using emotional tactics, guilt-tripping, exaggerating, or even twisting your words. If you're not fully present, it's easy to get swept up in the moment, say something you don't mean, or agree to something you'll later regret. But when you cultivate presence of mind, you create a mental buffer. You notice what's happening, assess the situation, and choose your next move deliberately. This isn't about being cold or detached, it's about being grounded and intentional. Think about how often we make decisions in a rush, only to look back and wonder, what was I thinking? Maybe it was agreeing to a commitment you didn't have time for, or buying something you didn't need because of a persuasive sales pitch. These moments of impulsivity often leave us feeling manipulated, not because someone forced us, but because we weren't fully present to make a clear choice. The Stoic approach encourages us to slow down, breathe, and ask ourselves, is this decision aligned with my values, or am I being swayed by external pressure? So, here's a question to reflect on. When was the last time you acted impulsively and regretted it? Recognizing these moments is the first step toward building a stronger presence of mind. By practicing mindfulness, whether through meditation, journaling, or simply taking a few deep breaths before responding, you create a shield against manipulation. You become the calm in the storm, the one who sees clearly even when others are trying to cloud your judgment. And in that clarity, you find not just protection but true freedom. Technique 4 invites us to explore one of the most powerful Stoic ideas, strengthening your inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, described this concept beautifully when he wrote, "You have within you a fortress that no storm can shake." What does that mean? It's about building an unshakable core of self-discipline, virtue, and clarity, a mental stronghold that protects you from external chaos and manipulation. Think of it as your personal sanctuary, a place where your values and principles remain intact, no matter what's happening around you. But how do you build this inner citadel? It starts with self-awareness and a commitment to living in alignment with your highest ideals. The Stoics believed that true strength comes from cultivating virtues like courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're practical tools that help you navigate life's challenges with integrity. When you know who you are and what you stand for, it becomes much harder for others to exploit your vulnerabilities or sway you with pressure. Let's bring this to life with a relatable example: peer pressure. Imagine you're at a social gathering and someone tries to persuade you to do something that goes against your values. Maybe it's drinking more than you're comfortable with, or joining in on gossip that feels wrong. In that moment, your inner citadel is your anchor. It reminds you of what truly matters to you, giving you the strength to say no without guilt or hesitation. You're not being stubborn or difficult, you're simply staying true to yourself. This isn't about being rigid or inflexible. It's about knowing your boundaries and standing firm in them. When you've built a strong inner citadel, you're less likely to be swayed by fleeting opinions or external pressures. Instead, you act from a place of confidence and clarity, grounded in your own values. So, here's a question to reflect on. What values do you hold so firmly that no one can shake them? Identifying these can help you strengthen your inner citadel, making you more resilient to manipulation and more aligned with your authentic self. By nurturing this inner strength, you create a shield that no storm can penetrate. It's not about shutting others out. It's about staying rooted in who you are, no matter what comes your way. And in that rootedness, you find not just protection, but a deep sense of peace and freedom. Technique 5 takes us into the heart of Stoic self-reflection, questioning your assumptions. Epictetus, the great Stoic teacher, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." At the core of this idea is the understanding that our reactions are shaped by our beliefs, and often those beliefs go unexamined. We assume certain things about people, situations, or even ourselves, and those assumptions can become blind spots that manipulators exploit. The Stoics believed that by rigorously questioning our impressions, we could free ourselves from the grip of these unchecked beliefs. Let's break this down with a modern example. Think about social media for a moment. How often do you scroll through your feed and feel a pang of envy or inadequacy? Maybe you see someone's perfectly curated vacation photos or their seemingly flawless career achievements, and you start comparing yourself. But here's the thing, those feelings aren't caused by the posts themselves, they're fueled by your assumptions. You assume their life is perfect, that they're happier or more successful than you, and that comparison leaves you feeling small. But what if you pause to question those assumptions? What if you reminded yourself that social media is a highlight reel, not the full story? Suddenly, the power of those posts diminishes, and so does their ability to manipulate your emotions. This practice isn't just about social media, though. It applies to every area of life. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague dismisses your idea. Your first reaction might be to feel hurt or defensive, assuming they don't respect you or value your input. But what if you questioned that assumption? What if their reaction had nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own stress or insecurities? By challenging your initial interpretation, you create space for a more thoughtful response, one that isn't driven by unchecked emotions. So, here's a question to reflect on. What beliefs do you hold that might be shaping your reactions unfairly? Are there assumptions you've never questioned, even though they influence how you see the world? The Stoics teach us that freedom begins with self-awareness. By examining your beliefs, you not only protect yourself from manipulation, but also gain a deeper understanding of your own mind. And in that understanding, you find the clarity to respond, not react, to whatever life throws your way. Technique 6 introduces a Stoic practice that might seem counterintuitive at first, embracing voluntary discomfort. Seneca, one of Stoicism's most influential voices, put it this way: set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" At its core, this practice is about willingly stepping into small hardships to build resilience and reduce your dependence on external comforts. It's not about punishing yourself or living a life of deprivation. It's about training your mind to handle adversity with grace and independence. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're someone who relies heavily on modern conveniences. Maybe you can't imagine starting your day without your favorite coffee or scrolling through your phone first thing in the morning. These habits might seem harmless, but over time they can create a sense of dependency. What happens if you're forced to go without them? You might feel irritable, anxious, or even powerless. But by intentionally choosing to skip these comforts from time to time, you remind yourself that you don't need them to function. You're not controlled by them. This small act of self-discipline strengthens your ability to say no not just to luxuries, but to external pressures and manipulations. Think about it this way: when you're overly attached to comfort, you're more likely to compromise your values or boundaries to maintain it. For example, someone might stay in a toxic relationship because they fear the discomfort of being alone, or they might agree to a request they don't want to fulfill because they're afraid of conflict. But when you've practiced voluntary discomfort, you've already proven to yourself that you can handle hardship. You've built a mental toughness that makes it easier to stand firm in your decisions, even when others try to sway you. So here's a question to reflect on. What comforts are you so attached to that they might make you vulnerable? Is it the need for approval, the fear of missing out, or perhaps the reliance on certain routines? By identifying these attachments, you can start to loosen their grip. And with each small act of voluntary discomfort, you strengthen your resilience, making it harder for anyone to manipulate you through fear, guilt, or pressure. This isn't about rejecting comfort entirely. It's about ensuring that comfort doesn't control you, and in that balance you find true freedom. Technique 7 brings us to the heart of emotional resilience, developing emotional equanimity. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This idea is central to emotional equanimity, the ability to remain calm and composed even when faced with provocation or chaos. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It's about cultivating a steady inner calm that allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. And here's the key: when you're emotionally stable, you become far less susceptible to manipulation. Picture this: you're in a toxic relationship and your partner knows exactly how to push your buttons. They might use guilt, anger, or even silence to get a reaction out of you. In those moments, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, to lash out, or to give in just to keep the peace. But emotional equanimity changes the game. Instead of being swept up in the storm, you stay grounded. You recognize that their behavior is about them, not you. You don't let their actions dictate your emotional state. And here's the beautiful part: when you refuse to react, you take away their power. Manipulators thrive on emotional responses. They feed off your anger, your frustration, your guilt. But when you remain calm, you disarm them. You show them that their tactics won't work. This doesn't mean you ignore the situation or pretend it doesn't bother you. It's about choosing how you engage. Maybe you set a boundary, or you calmly express how their behavior affects you. The point is, you're in control of your response, not the other way around, and that's where true strength lies. So, here's a question to reflect on. How do you typically respond when someone tries to provoke you? Do you find yourself getting defensive, angry, or upset? Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward building emotional equanimity. And with practice, you can transform those reactive moments into opportunities for growth and self-mastery. By developing this inner calm, you create a shield that no provocation can penetrate. You become the steady presence in the room, the one who remains unshaken even when others are trying to rattle you. And in that steadiness, you find not just protection from manipulation, but a deep sense of peace and freedom. Emotional equanimity isn't about being emotionless, it's about being in charge of your emotions so they no longer control you. Technique 8 shifts our focus to a cornerstone of self-protection, setting clear boundaries. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "Respect yourself, and others will respect you." This simple yet profound statement captures the essence of why boundaries matter. They're not about building walls or shutting people out, they're about honoring your own needs, values, and limits. When you set boundaries, you send a clear message: this is where I stand, and this is what I will not tolerate. It's a declaration of self-respect that, over time, earns the respect of others. but why are boundaries so crucial in protecting yourself from manipulation? Think of it this way: without clear limits, you're like a ship without an anchor, drifting wherever the currents take you. Others may push, pull, or steer you in directions that don't align with your values or well-being. The Stoics understood this well. They believed that firm but respectful boundaries are essential for maintaining inner peace and integrity. By defining what's acceptable and what's not, you create a framework that guides your interactions and decisions, making it harder for others to exploit or overwhelm you. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine a friend who constantly asks for favors, borrowing money, expecting last-minute help, or monopolizing your time. At first, you might say yes out of kindness or a desire to avoid conflict, but over time, these demands can drain you, leaving you feeling resentful or taken for granted. Setting a boundary here doesn't mean cutting them off or being harsh. It could be as simple as saying, "I care about you, but I need to prioritize my own well-being right now." This approach is rooted in Stoic principles. It's firm, respectful, and aligned with your values. The beauty of boundaries is that they're not just about saying no, they're about saying yes to what truly matters to you. They free you from the weight of others' expectations and allow you to focus on what's meaningful. So, here's a question to reflect on. Where in your life do you need to set stronger boundaries? Is it at work, in relationships, or even with yourself? Recognizing these areas is the first step toward reclaiming your time, energy, and peace of mind. By setting clear boundaries, you not only protect yourself from manipulation, but also cultivate a deeper sense of self-respect. It's a practice that requires courage and consistency, but the rewards are immense. You become the author of your own life, steering it with intention and clarity. And in that clarity, you find not just protection, but a profound sense of freedom and empowerment. Technique 9 invites us to step back and see the bigger picture, what the Stoics called the view from above. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, often reflected on this idea, writing, "Look at everything as if seeing it for the first time or the last time. Then your time on earth will be filled with glory." This exercise is about zooming out, imagining yourself looking down on your life from a great height, and realizing how small many of our daily struggles truly are. It's a powerful way to gain perspective, especially when you're caught in the heat of a manipulative situation. Let's bring this to life with a relatable scenario: workplace drama. Imagine you're in the middle of a tense meeting and a colleague is trying to undermine your ideas or take credit for your work. In the moment, it feels personal, frustrating, even infuriating. But what if you paused and practiced the view from above? Picture yourself looking down on the entire office, the city, even the planet. From that vantage point, how significant is this conflict? Does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? Suddenly, the sting of their behavior loses its power. You realize that their actions are more about their own insecurities than anything you've done. And with that clarity, you can respond calmly and strategically rather than reacting emotionally. This technique isn't about dismissing your feelings or pretending the situation doesn't matter. It's about shifting your focus from the immediate drama to the broader context. When you see things from a higher perspective, you're less likely to be swayed by petty tactics or emotional manipulation. Instead, you can approach the situation with a sense of calm and purpose, knowing that this moment is just one small part of your journey. So, here's a question to reflect on. How would your current challenges look if you viewed them from a higher perspective? What might you see that you're missing when you're caught up in the details? By practicing the view from above, you not only protect yourself from manipulation but also cultivate a deeper sense of peace and clarity. It's a reminder that, in the grand tapestry of life, most of what we worry about is just a single thread important, yes, but not the whole story. And in that realization, you find the freedom to navigate life with wisdom and grace. Technique 10 brings us to one of the most transformative Stoic principles, focusing on virtue over validation. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher, once said, "If you wish to be good, first believe that you are bad." At first glance, this might sound harsh, but its meaning is profound. It's a call to prioritize your own moral integrity over the fleeting approval of others. The Stoics believed that true fulfillment comes from living in alignment with your values, not from external praise or recognition. And here's why this matters. When you're driven by a need for validation, you become vulnerable to manipulation. People who sense this desire can exploit it, using flattery, guilt, or even criticism to sway your actions. Let's take a modern example: social media. How often do we post something only to anxiously check how many likes or comments it gets? That little rush of dopamine when someone compliments your photo or agrees with your opinion can feel good, but it's a double-edged sword. When you start tailoring your behavior, what you say, what you share, even how you present yourself, to gain more validation, you're no longer acting from a place of authenticity. You're giving others the power to define your worth, and that's exactly what manipulators thrive on. They know that if they can control your need for approval, they can control you. But what if you shifted your focus? Instead of asking, "What will people think?" you ask, "Is this aligned with my values?" Imagine you're in a situation where someone is pressuring you to go along with something you don't believe in. Maybe it's a questionable business practice or a social norm that feels wrong. If your priority is validation, you might go along with it to avoid conflict or gain acceptance. But if your priority is virtue, you'll stand firm, even if it means facing disapproval. That's the power of living by your principles. It's not about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about striving to do what's right, even when it's hard. So, here's a question to reflect on. When have you compromised your values to please others? It's a moment we've all experienced, whether it's staying silent when you should have spoken up or agreeing to something you didn't truly believe in. Recognizing these moments is the first step toward reclaiming your autonomy. By focusing on virtue over validation, you build a stronger sense of self, one that's grounded in integrity rather than external approval. And in that grounding, you find not just protection from manipulation, but a deeper, more enduring sense of fulfillment. Technique 11 introduces a subtle yet profoundly effective tool in the Stoic arsenal: the art of silence. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "Speech is the mirror of the soul. As a man speaks, so he is." But sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Silence, when used intentionally, can be a shield against manipulation, a way to deny others the reaction they're seeking. It's not about being passive or indifferent. It's about choosing when to speak and when to let your quiet presence speak louder than words. Think about how often we feel compelled to respond, to defend ourselves, to correct someone, or to fill an awkward pause. In those moments, our words can become weapons, not just for others, but against ourselves. Manipulators thrive on reactions. They want to see you flustered, angry, or defensive because that's how they gain control. But when you respond with silence, you take away their power. You show them that their words or actions don't have the effect they intended, and in that silence, you reclaim your own agency. Let's bring this to life with an example: gossip. Imagine you're at work and a coworker starts spreading rumors about you. Your first instinct might be to confront them, to set the record straight, or even to retaliate with gossip of your own. But what if instead you chose silence, not out of fear or weakness, but out of strength? By refusing to engage, you deny them the satisfaction of a reaction. You show them that their words don't define you. Over time, this approach can disarm even the most persistent manipulators because they'll realize their tactics no longer work. This doesn't mean you should never speak up. There are times when silence isn't the right choice, when standing up for yourself or others is necessary. But the key is to pause and ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Will my words add value, or will they simply feed into the drama? By mastering the art of silence, you learn to respond with intention, not impulse. So here's a question to reflect on. When have you spoken too quickly and regretted it? Recognizing those moments can help you cultivate the discipline of silence, turning it into a powerful tool for self-protection and inner peace. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's a deliberate choice, a way of asserting your boundaries without saying a word. It's a reminder that you don't have to react to every provocation or justify yourself to everyone. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply to say nothing at all. And in that quiet strength, you find not just protection from manipulation, but a deeper sense of calm and control. Technique 12 invites us to embrace one of the most empowering Stoic practices, reframing challenges as opportunities. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." At its core, this idea is about shifting your perspective, seeing obstacles not as setbacks, but as stepping stones for growth. When you adopt this mindset, you transform adversity into a tool for resilience, making it far harder for others to manipulate or control you. Let's break this down with a practical example: criticism. Imagine you've just presented a project at work and a colleague responds with harsh feedback. Your first reaction might be to feel defensive, hurt, or even angry. But what if, instead of seeing their words as an attack, you viewed them as an opportunity? What if you asked yourself, what can I learn from this? Is there a kernel of truth here that could help me improve? By reframing the situation, you take the power away from the critic and place it back in your own hands. You're no longer a victim of their words, you're an active participant in your own growth. This approach doesn't mean you have to agree with every critique or ignore your feelings. It's about choosing how you engage with the situation. When you see challenges as opportunities, you become less reactive and more reflective. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's being acted upon and start seeing yourself as someone who's taking action. And that shift in perspective is incredibly liberating. It's a reminder that you have the power to shape your own narrative, even in the face of adversity. So here's a question to reflect on. How can you reframe a recent challenge as a chance to grow? Maybe it's a difficult conversation, a missed opportunity, or even a personal failure. What lessons can you draw from it? What strengths can you build? By asking these questions, you begin to see obstacles not as roadblocks, but as invitations to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And in that transformation, you find not just protection from manipulation, but a deeper sense of purpose and empowerment. Reframing challenges as opportunities isn't about denying the difficulty of life, it's about embracing it. It's about recognizing that every obstacle holds the potential for growth, if only you're willing to look for it. And when you do, you'll find that the very things that once seemed to hold you back can become the tools that propel you forward. Technique 13 invites us to explore a subtle yet profound Stoic principle: avoiding over-identification with roles. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "You are not your job, your title, or your status. You are your character and your choices." This idea is a powerful reminder that while external roles, like being a manager, a parent, or a friend, are part of our lives, they don't define our worth. When we tie our identity too closely to these labels, we risk becoming vulnerable to manipulation. Why? Because manipulators know how to exploit our attachment to these roles, using them as leverage to control or pressure us. Let's bring this to life with a workplace example. Imagine you've worked hard to earn a leadership position and you're proud of your title. But what happens when someone uses that title against you? Maybe a colleague says a good leader would agree to this, or if you were really committed to the team, you'd do this. Suddenly, your role becomes a tool for manipulation. They're not appealing to your values or your judgment, they're appealing to your attachment to the title. And if you're overly identified with that role, you might feel compelled to comply, even if it goes against your better judgment. The Stoic approach encourages us to step back and see these roles for what they are: temporary, external, and ultimately separate from our true selves. This doesn't mean you shouldn't take pride in your work or your relationships. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't tied to any label or position. When you detach from these external identities, you free yourself from the pressure to conform or perform in ways that don't align with your values. You become less susceptible to manipulation because you're no longer driven by the need to uphold a particular image. So, here's a question to reflect on. What roles or labels do you cling to that might make you vulnerable? Is it your job title, your social status, or even the expectations others have of you? By identifying these attachments, you can start to loosen their grip. You can remind yourself that your true value lies not in what you do, but in who you are, your character, your integrity, and your choices. And in that realization, you find a deeper sense of freedom and resilience, one that no manipulator can easily shake. Technique 14 brings us to a practice that's as simple as it is transformative: cultivating gratitude for what you already have. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." At its heart, this idea is about shifting your focus from what you lack to what you possess, not just material things, but the intangible gifts of life like health, relationships, and even the ability to think and choose. When you practice gratitude, you build a sense of inner abundance that makes you far less vulnerable to manipulation. Why? Because manipulators often prey on our sense of lack, our fears, our insecurities, our desire for more. But when you're grounded in gratitude, those tactics lose their power. Let's make this tangible with an example: consumerism. Think about how often we're bombarded with messages telling us we need more: a newer phone, a trendier wardrobe, a bigger house. These messages are designed to make us feel incomplete, as if our happiness depends on acquiring something we don't yet have. But what if, instead of chasing the next purchase, you pause to appreciate what you already own? That phone in your hand, the clothes in your closet, the roof over your head, these are things many people dream of having. By focusing on what you have rather than what you lack, you break free from the cycle of endless wanting. You realize that true contentment comes from within, not from external possessions. This practice isn't just about resisting consumerism, though. It's about building a mindset of abundance that extends to every area of life. Imagine you're in a situation where someone is trying to manipulate you by playing on your insecurities. Maybe they're criticizing your appearance, your skills, or your choices. If you're rooted in gratitude, their words won't land as heavily. You'll recognize that their opinion doesn't define your worth. You'll see that you already have so much to be thankful for, and that perspective will shield you from their attempts to control or diminish you. So here's a question to reflect on. What do you already have that you often take for granted? Is it your health, your relationships, or even the simple freedom to make your own choices? Taking a moment to acknowledge these gifts can shift your entire outlook. Gratitude isn't just a feel-good exercise. It's a powerful tool for building resilience and protecting yourself from manipulation. When you're grounded in appreciation, you're less likely to be swayed by external pressures or false promises. You're anchored in the present, content with what you have, and free to live on your own terms. And in that freedom, you find not just protection, but a deep and lasting sense of peace. Technique 15 brings us to one of the most foundational Stoic practices: cultivating self-awareness. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that true strength and clarity come from understanding ourselves deeply. Self-awareness isn't just about knowing your likes and dislikes, it's about recognizing your patterns, your triggers, and the ways you might unknowingly contribute to situations where manipulation thrives. When you're deeply attuned to your inner world, you're far less likely to be swayed by external pressures or tactics. Let's break this down with a practical example. Imagine you're in a conversation and someone says something that instantly makes you defensive. Maybe it's a comment about your work, your appearance, or even your choices. Your first reaction might be to lash out or shut down. But what if instead of reacting, you paused and asked yourself, why does this bother me so much? That moment of self-reflection is where self-awareness begins. It's about digging beneath the surface to uncover the emotional triggers that others might exploit. Maybe it's a fear of failure, a need for approval, or an old insecurity. When you understand these triggers, you can respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This practice isn't just about protecting yourself from manipulation, it's about taking ownership of your emotional landscape. The Stoics believed that self-awareness is the key to self-mastery. When you know your strengths and weaknesses, your values and vulnerabilities, you're better equipped to navigate life's challenges with integrity and calm. You become less reactive and more intentional, less vulnerable to manipulation, and more grounded in your own truth. So, here's a question to reflect on. What habits or reactions do you need to examine more closely? Are there moments when you feel yourself being pulled into someone else's agenda, or times when your emotions seem to take the wheel? By shining a light on these patterns, you can start to break free from them. Self-awareness isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that no one else can define your worth or dictate your actions. And in that understanding, you find not just protection, but a profound sense of freedom and empowerment. Technique 16 brings us to a skill that's as simple as it is powerful: learning to say no gracefully. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." At its core, this idea reminds us that true freedom comes from setting boundaries, from knowing when to say no and doing so without guilt or hesitation. When you master this skill, you protect yourself from exploitation and reclaim your time, energy, and peace of mind. But why is saying no so difficult for so many of us? Often, it's because we fear disappointing others or being seen as selfish. We worry that saying no will damage relationships or make us seem unkind. The Stoics, however, saw it differently. They believed that saying no isn't about rejecting others, it's about honoring yourself. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are finite resources, and that every yes to someone else is a no to yourself. By setting clear boundaries, you create space for what truly matters, whether that's your well-being, your goals, or your relationships with those who truly value you. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine a friend asks you to help them move on a weekend when you've already planned to recharge after a long week. Your first instinct might be to say yes, even if it means sacrificing your own needs. But what if instead you said, "I'd love to help, but I need this time to rest. Let me know if there's another way I can support you." This response is firm yet kind, and it communicates that your boundaries are just as important as their request. It's not about being unhelpful, it's about being honest and intentional with your commitments. The beauty of saying no gracefully is that it's not just about protecting yourself, it's about building healthier relationships. When you're clear about your limits, others learn to respect them. They understand that your yeses are meaningful because they're not given out of obligation or guilt. and over time, this clarity fosters mutual respect and understanding. So here's a question to reflect on. Where do you struggle to say no, and why? Is it at work, in your personal life, or even to yourself? Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward reclaiming your freedom and living with greater intention. By learning to say no gracefully, you not only protect yourself from manipulation, but also cultivate a deeper sense of self-respect. It's a practice that requires courage and consistency, but the rewards are immense. You become the author of your own life, steering it with clarity and purpose. And in that clarity, you find not just protection, but a profound sense of freedom and empowerment. Technique 17 takes us into a territory many of us know all too well, the trap of comparison. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once warned, "Envy is the ulcer of the soul." It's a vivid image, isn't it? Envy, like a wound that festers, eats away at our peace and contentment. And at the heart of envy lies comparison. When we measure ourselves against others, we open the door to dissatisfaction, insecurity, and ultimately manipulation. Why? Because comparison shifts our focus from what we have to what we lack, and that sense of lack makes us vulnerable to external pressures and influences. Let's bring this to life with a modern example: social media. How often do you scroll through your feed and feel a pang of envy? Maybe it's someone's perfectly curated vacation photos, their seemingly flawless career achievements, or even their picture-perfect relationships. In those moments, it's easy to forget that what you're seeing is just a highlight reel, a carefully edited version of reality. But the Stoics remind us that comparison is a losing game. When you measure your life against someone else's, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing your behind the scenes to their greatest hits. And that's a recipe for discontent. Here's the deeper truth: comparison doesn't just make us feel bad, it makes us easier to manipulate. Think about it. When you're focused on what others have, you're more likely to make decisions based on what you think you should have, rather than what aligns with your values. Maybe it's buying something you can't afford to keep up with a friend's lifestyle, or pursuing a career path because it looks impressive, even if it doesn't fulfill you. These choices, driven by comparison, leave you vulnerable to external pressures, whether it's societal expectations, peer influence, or even marketing tactics designed to exploit your insecurities. So here's a question to reflect on. When do you feel most tempted to compare yourself to others? Is it when you're scrolling through social media, or perhaps when you're in a room full of people who seem to have it all together? Recognizing these moments is the first step toward breaking free from the comparison trap. The Stoics teach us that true contentment comes from within, from focusing on our own progress, our own values, and our own journey. When you stop measuring yourself against others, you reclaim your power. You become less susceptible to manipulation and more grounded in your own truth. By avoiding the trap of comparison, you not only protect yourself from external pressures, but also cultivate a deeper sense of self-worth. It's a practice that requires mindfulness and self-compassion, but the rewards are immense. You begin to see your life not as a competition, but as a unique path, one that's rich with its own challenges, triumphs, and meaning. And in that realization, you find not just protection from manipulation, but a profound sense of freedom and peace. Technique 18 brings us to one of the most profound Stoic practices, meditating on impermanence. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." At first glance, this might sound stark, even unsettling, but its message is deeply liberating. It's a reminder that everything, our struggles, our successes, even our very lives, is fleeting. When we truly internalize this truth, it changes how we approach challenges, relationships, and even manipulation. Why? Because when you understand that nothing lasts forever, the power others hold over you begins to fade. Let's make this tangible with an example: holding grudges. Imagine someone has wronged you. Maybe a friend betrayed your trust or a colleague took credit for your work. It's natural to feel anger, resentment, even a desire for revenge. But what if, instead of clinging to those feelings, you paused and reflected on the impermanence of the situation? What if you asked yourself, will this matter in a year, in 5 years, on my deathbed? Suddenly, the weight of the grudge feels lighter. You realize that the pain you're holding onto is temporary, and so is the person who caused it. By letting go, you free yourself from the emotional chains that bind you. You take back your power not by fighting, but by releasing. This practice isn't just about grudges, though. It's about recognizing the transient nature of all things, our possessions, our relationships, even our emotions. When you meditate on impermanence, you become less attached to outcomes and less reactive to external pressures. Manipulators thrive on our attachment to approval, to control, to the illusion of permanence. But when you see through that illusion, their tactics lose their grip. You realize that their words, their actions, even their attempts to control you, are as fleeting as a passing cloud. And in that realization, you find a deep sense of peace and freedom. So here's a question to reflect on. What would you do differently if you remembered how temporary everything is? Would you hold onto anger so tightly? Would you waste energy trying to control what you can't? Or would you focus on what truly matters, your values, your relationships, your own growth? By embracing the impermanence of all things, you not only protect yourself from manipulation, but also cultivate a life of greater meaning and presence. It's a practice that invites you to live fully, not in fear of what's to come, but in appreciation of what's here now. And in that appreciation, you find not just protection, but a profound sense of clarity and purpose. Now that we've explored all 18 Stoic techniques, let's take a moment to reflect on their collective power. From understanding the dichotomy of control to practicing cognitive detachment, cultivating presence of mind, and embracing impermanence, each strategy offers a unique way to guard your inner peace and reclaim your autonomy. Together, they form a toolkit for navigating life's challenges with clarity, confidence, and resilience. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practical, actionable steps you can take to protect yourself from manipulation and live with greater intention. At the heart of Stoicism is a profound message: true freedom comes from within. It's not about controlling the world around you, but about mastering your own mind and emotions. As Epictetus once said, no man is free who is not master of himself. This is the essence of what we've explored today. By focusing on what you can control, your thoughts, your choices, your responses, you build an unshakable foundation that no external force can easily disrupt. You become the author of your own story, steering it with purpose and integrity. As we wrap up, I encourage you to reflect on which of these techniques resonated most with you. Was it the practice of setting clear boundaries, or perhaps the power of reframing challenges as opportunities? Maybe it was the reminder to focus on virtue over validation, or the liberating practice of meditating on impermanence. Whatever it is, take a moment to consider how you can integrate these ideas into your daily life. Start small, and remember that progress, not perfection, is the goal. If you found this exploration of Stoic techniques helpful, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which strategies stood out to you, and how do you plan to apply them? Share your reflections in the comments below. I'm always inspired by your insights, and if you're eager to dive deeper into Stoic wisdom, consider subscribing for more content like this. Together, let's continue this journey toward inner freedom, resilience, and a life lived on our own terms. Thank you for joining me, and remember, the power to protect yourself from manipulation and to live with purpose is already within you.